My husband Arthur's inheritance meeting. That's when I found out my daughter-in-law Charlotte was fabricating stories, trying to declare me incompetent and steal everything. She even forged documents. I just listened, outwardly calm. But a storm raged within me. She had no idea what was coming. This is my story of reclaiming what's mine. Like, share, and let me know where you're watching from. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain that hadn't quite materialized. I clutched the strap of my sensible leather handbag, my knuckles white under the thin skin of my fingers. Today was the day. The meeting about Arthur's will. My late husband, it had been 3 months since he passed, and the grief still felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making every breath a conscious effort. Today, however, wasn't about grieving alone. It was about facing a formality, a necessary step in navigating the world Arthur had left behind. I parked my car in the multi-level garage beneath Sterling and Associates, the law firm Arthur had founded decades ago as Morrison and Associates, before passing the reins to his partners years ago. Even the name change felt like a betrayal of his legacy sometimes. A chill, unrelated to the November air, snaked its way up my spine. My stomach churned with a nervous energy I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the inherent anxiety of legal proceedings. It was a vague unease, a premonition that something was amiss. As I reached for my car door handle, a figure suddenly materialized from between two dark SUVs. A man. He was disheveled, his overcoat too large, his hair a mess, and a 5 o'clock shadow darkening his jaw. His eyes, though, were sharp, almost desperate. "Ma'am," he blurted, his voice hushed but urgent. "Don't start that car." I froze, my hand hovering mid-air. My first instinct was alarm. I was alone in a dimly lit parking garage. Danger. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Your daughter-in-law," he added, his gaze darting around as if expecting someone to overhear. My blood ran cold, a sudden, icy shock. Charlotte? What could she possibly have to do with this strange man? My mind raced, trying to make sense of his disjointed warning. For a fleeting second, I considered him a panhandler, or worse, someone with ill intentions. Arthur had always warned me about strangers, especially those who approached with unsolicited advice or information. "Trust your gut, Eleanor," he'd often said, "but verify everything." My gut was screaming danger, but the mention of Charlotte tugged at a deeper, more unsettling chord. I tried to dismiss him, to turn away, but his next words stopped me. "My name is David Riley. I used to be a paralegal at Morrison and Associates. Back when it was Arthur's firm. The change in the firm's name, something only someone intimately familiar with its history would know, gave him an ounce of credibility I hadn't expected. My fear mingled with a burgeoning curiosity, a sense of dread. "What are you talking about, Mr. Riley?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, trying to appear calm despite the tremor in my hands. He leaned closer, his breath smelling faintly of coffee and desperation. After the firm became Sterling and Associates, they started a side business. And your daughter-in-law, Charlotte, she's involved. Deeply, my mind reeled. Charlotte? My daughter-in-law? The pleasant, if sometimes overly ambitious, young woman who had married my son, Michael, 8 years ago? The idea was preposterous. Yet, David's intensity was undeniable. "She's been conspiring with some of the senior partners here," he continued, his voice barely audible above the hum of the garage. "She's planning to alter Arthur's will. To have you declared mentally incompetent." The words hit me like a physical blow. Mentally incompetent. Me? A gasp escaped my lips, a sharp, involuntary sound. I stared at him, my mouth agape, unable to process the enormity of his accusation. It was insane. It was cruel. It was unbelievable. David pressed on, oblivious to my shock. "They've got forged medical records, fabricated statements from people claiming to have witnessed erratic behavior from you, all to support her claims and get the will overturned in her favor." A wave of heat, quickly followed by a cold sweat, washed over me. Forged medical records. The audacity, the sheer malevolence of it. My initial fear gave way to a surge of pure, unadulterated anger. I had always prided myself on my sharp mind, my resilience, especially after Arthur's passing. To be accused of mental incompetence was not just an insult. It was an attempt to strip me of my dignity, my very identity. This firm, Sterling & Associates, David explained, his eyes narrowed. They specialize in manipulating wills for a high fee. It's their dirty little secret. Charlotte, she's paying them handsomely for this. She sees an opportunity now that Arthur isn't here to protect you. The pieces, though horrifying, began to click into place with an awful precision. The vague unease I'd felt, the sense of something wrong. It wasn't just my grief. It was a serpent in my garden, and its name was Charlotte. You need to be extremely cautious in that meeting, ma'am, he warned, his voice regaining some of its urgency. Do not sign anything, absolutely anything, without having your own counsel review it first. Demand copies of everything. Question every statement, every document. My head was spinning. The cold metal of my car felt like ice beneath my trembling fingers. I had 100 questions, a desperate need for more details, for proof, for clarity. Who exactly were these partners? How deep did this conspiracy go? But before I could articulate a single query, David Riley melted back into the shadows of the parking garage as quickly and mysteriously as he had appeared. One moment he was there, a desperate prophet of doom. The next, he was gone, leaving me reeling, alone with a chilling truth. As I made my way to the elevator, my mind raced, revisiting the last 8 years with Charlotte. Little things. Her intense interest in Arthur's financial affairs, her subtle probing questions about my own health, my memory. I'd dismissed them then as youthful curiosity or even concern. But now, viewed through the lens of David's warning, they transformed into something sinister, unsettling. Her overly sweet smiles, her almost imperceptible eye rolls when I'd repeated a story Arthur loved, her quiet conversations with some of the junior lawyers when Arthur was still alive. They weren't isolated incidents anymore. They were threads in a meticulously woven web of deceit. The elevator doors chimed, opening with a soft sigh. As I stepped inside, my gaze involuntarily flickered back towards the dark recesses of the garage where David Riley had vanished. For a split second, I saw him again. He was standing there, partially obscured by a support pillar, watching me. His face, still etched with worry, held a profound sadness, a confirmation that what he had told me was not the raving of a madman, but a desperate plea, a stark warning. The weight of his concern settled deep within me, solidifying the terrifying reality of my situation. The elevator glided silently upwards, depositing me on the opulent 25th floor of Sterling & Associates. The reception area was a tableau of understated wealth. Polished marble floors, sleek modern art adorning walls, and a panoramic view of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Before David's warning, I would have appreciated the quiet elegance, a testament to Arthur's vision. Now, it felt sinister, a gilded cage built on deception. Each expensive furnishing seemed to hum with the unspoken whispers of manipulated lives and stolen legacies. A young, impeccably dressed receptionist with a practiced smile looked up from her screen. "Eleanor Vance?" she asked, her voice smooth and modulated. "Yes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning inside me. "Conference room A, please. Mr. Sterling is waiting." She gestured towards a frosted glass door at the end of a long, hushed corridor. My heart began to pound a little harder with each step. This was it. The moment of truth. I pushed open the heavy door to Conference Room A, and the scene within unfolded exactly as David Riley had described, or rather, hinted at. Seated around a vast, gleaming mahogany table were 4 figures. My daughter-in-law, Charlotte, was positioned directly opposite the door, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. Beside her sat Mr. Sterling, a man whose reputation for shrewd, aggressive litigation preceded him, even in Arthur's day. 2 other younger attorneys, both sharp-suited and serious-faced, occupied the remaining seats, their eyes already fixed on me. Charlotte, ever the actress, rose from her seat, her expression morphing into one of exaggerated surprise. "Oh, Eleanor," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "I didn't think you were coming today. We were just about to get started." My gaze met hers across the expanse of the table. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, now seemed to hold a calculating glint I hadn't noticed before. The casual dismissal in her tone, the implication that my presence was somehow optional, was a carefully crafted insult. But I had come prepared, braced by David's revelation. "I am here," I stated, my voice surprisingly steady, "to discuss Arthur's estate. As his wife, and the primary beneficiary, I believe my presence is not just expected, but required." I walked to the vacant chair at the head of the table, pulling it out with a deliberate slowness. "Mr. Sterling" cleared his throat, a sound that seemed designed to command attention. He was a man of impressive stature, his silver hair swept back from a strong, angular face. His gaze was direct, almost piercing. "Mrs. Vance, thank you for joining us," he said, his tone professional, devoid of warmth. He gestured to a stack of documents neatly arranged before my empty seat. "We have a few matters to discuss, and some documents that require your signature to finalize the probate process." As I settled into my chair, my eyes flickered to Charlotte. Her usually composed demeanor was subtly off. She was fidgeting, a quick, almost imperceptible adjustment of her pearl necklace, a nervous glance at Mr. Sterling. The small, telltale signs confirmed David's warning. She was anxious, not about my presence, but about my reaction. "Before I sign anything," I began, my voice clear and firm, "I believe I am quite familiar with the contents of Arthur's will. We discussed it extensively over the years. What developments could possibly necessitate my signature today that haven't already been addressed?" I looked directly at Mr. Sterling, challenging him to obfuscate. Mr. Sterling's expression remained impassive, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a momentary pause before he spoke. "Well, Mrs. Vance, as you know, Arthur was a meticulous man. In his final weeks, he made some amendments to his estate plan. Due to certain concerns," he paused, letting the implication hang in the air, a vague shroud over the truth. "Concerns?" I interrupted, my tone sharp, cutting through his practiced vagueness. "What concerns exactly, Mr. Sterling?" Arthur was of sound mind until his very last moments. We spoke daily, often about the future. He never mentioned any amendments or concerns that would alter the clear intentions of his will, which he made known to me for decades. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table, trying to project an air of unshakable resolve. Charlotte, seizing her cue, interjected, her voice laced with what she clearly intended as sympathy, but which to me now sounded like thinly veiled malice. "Eleanor, darling, Arthur was worried about you. Your health. He mentioned incidents. You've been a bit confused lately, a little forgetful." We all noticed. Her eyes, though wide with feigned concern, held a predatory gleam. A cold wave of fury washed over me. The audacity, the sheer cruelty of twisting my grief, my occasional distraction, into a narrative of mental decline. Before I could retort, one of the younger attorneys, a woman with sharp features and an even sharper gaze, slid a slim folder across the table towards me. "Mrs. Vance," she stated, her voice clipped and professional. "These are reports concerning your recent behavior, as well as some medical assessments Arthur commissioned shortly before his passing." My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the folder. Inside were several stapled documents, a doctor's note, generic and vaguely worded, hinting at cognitive decline in an elderly patient. Then, a series of typed statements, purportedly from various individuals, and finally, a handwritten note, folded neatly. I opened the handwritten note. The looping script was instantly recognizable. Charlotte's. I read the words, and a deep, guttural anger rose within me, threatening to choke me. It detailed an incident where I had allegedly become agitated during a family dinner, accusing my late son, Thomas, of stealing Arthur's antique watch. A watch that had, in fact, been safely locked in his study all along. It painted a picture of a confused, aggressive old woman, losing her grasp on reality. "This is an absolute fabrication," I exclaimed, slamming the paper back onto the table. My voice cracked with indignation. "I never accused Thomas of anything. He passed years before Arthur, and I cherished that watch as much as Arthur did." "This is a lie." Charlotte, however, simply sighed. A mournful, theatrical sound. "Eleanor, dear, you just don't remember. It was very distressing for Arthur, and for me, to witness it. He made these arrangements out of love, to ensure you would be cared for properly, without the burden of managing his complex estate." Her expression was a mask of practiced pity, but her eyes, when they briefly met mine, held a flash of triumph, a flicker of cold, hard satisfaction. In that moment, looking at the familiar face of my daughter-in-law, a woman I had welcomed into my family, I no longer saw Charlotte. I saw a stranger, a deceptive, calculating stranger, hidden beneath a veneer of familial affection. "So, what exactly are these arrangements Arthur supposedly made?" I asked, pushing the forged document away, my voice tight with barely suppressed rage. My gaze swept from Charlotte to Mr. Sterling, demanding a concrete answer. The pity in Charlotte's eyes was now a thinly veiled mockery, and it fueled my resolve. Mr. Sterling leaned back. A picture of practiced composure. "Arthur, in his wisdom, established a testamentary trust. Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice smooth and authoritative. "The trust is designed to manage his estate for your continued care and comfort. The trustee appointed to oversee this, given the aforementioned concerns, is your son, Thomas." The words hung in the air, echoing with a chilling emptiness. My son, Thomas. Thomas, who had passed away 5 years prior. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. Arthur wouldn't have appointed a deceased man as trustee. This was an outright lie, a glaring flaw in their carefully constructed deception. But what Mr. Sterling said next was even more insidious. "This arrangement ensures that your financial needs are met without the burden of managing complex investments, allowing you to focus on your well-being." It was a thinly disguised implication that Arthur didn't trust me with my own finances, that I was incapable of managing them myself. A wave of profound sadness, mixed with burning indignation, washed over me. Arthur, my loving, trusting husband, would never have done this. He believed in my capabilities, my acumen. "It's protection, Eleanor, darling," Charlotte interjected quickly, her voice a little too eager, a little too saccharine. She reached across the table, her hand briefly touching my arm, a gesture I instantly recoiled from. "It stems from Arthur's deep love for you. He just wanted to make sure you were looked after, no matter what." "No matter what?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "Or no matter who stood in the way of what you wanted?" I knew David's warning was accurate, that this entire charade was orchestrated by Charlotte. My anger began to solidify into a cold, determined resolve. As Charlotte stammered a response, trying to maintain her facade of concern, my eyes drifted around the room. It was a habit from my days assisting Arthur with his own firm's paperwork, a keen observation for details. And then I saw it, tucked discreetly into a decorative floral arrangement on a credenza in the corner of the room. A tiny red light pulsed almost imperceptibly. A recording device. "Is this meeting being recorded?" I asked, my voice cutting through Charlotte's protests and Mr. Sterling's attempts to redirect the conversation. My gaze locked onto the blinking red light. The attorneys exchanged uneasy glances. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat again, a nervous tick now rather than a power play. "It's standard procedure, Mrs. Vance, for important legal discussions, for accuracy of record." "Standard procedure? Or evidence collection for your fabricated narrative?" I challenged, not letting him finish. The abruptness of my question seemed to unnerve them, their smooth, professional masks slipping for a moment, before Mr. Sterling could formulate a reply. There was a soft tap at the door. A young secretary, looking flustered, poked her head in. "Excuse me, Mr. Sterling. There's a Mr. David Riley here. He says he has urgent information regarding the Vance case. He insists on speaking to Mrs. Vance directly." The color drained from Charlotte's face with astonishing speed. Her carefully constructed composure shattered. "David Riley?" she blurted out, her voice high and reedy, a stark contrast to her earlier calm. "I don't know anyone by that name. Tell him to leave." Her eyes darted frantically between the attorneys and me. "No," I said, my voice cutting across Charlotte's frantic protestations with unexpected authority. "Show Mr. Riley in. If he has information pertaining to Arthur's estate, I want to hear it." My gaze was fixed on Charlotte, who now looked like a cornered animal. This was my opening. A window of opportunity provided by David's courage. The secretary, looking bewildered by the conflicting instructions, hesitated for a moment, then disappeared. A few tense seconds later, David Riley appeared in the doorway. He looked different now, not disheveled but composed, though his eyes still held that intense, urgent glint. He carried a worn leather briefcase. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice respectful, almost formal, as if we hadn't met in the shadowy depths of a parking garage. "Mr. Sterling," recovering his composure, stood up abruptly. "Mr. Riley, I believe you have no business here. This is a private legal consultation. I'm going to have security escort you out." He reached for the phone on the table. David remained calm, his gaze unwavering. "Before you do that, Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Vance needs to see this. She has a right to the truth about her husband's will, and the truth about your firm's extracurricular activities." With that, David reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. He approached the table, laying it down with a soft thump. "These are copies of Arthur Vance's original, valid will," he stated, his voice clear and resonant, and his genuine medical reports, dated up to a week before his passing, confirming he was of sound mind and body. Charlotte, who had been gripping the edge of the table, suddenly swayed. I don't feel well," she mumbled, her face an ashen mask. She made a pathetic attempt to stand, perhaps to flee. "Sit down, Charlotte," I commanded, my voice cold and steely. "You will sit down and you will listen. Every last word." My words seemed to pin her to the chair. She sank back down, trembling visibly. David opened his folder, revealing meticulously organized documents. "Mr. Sterling," he began, addressing the lead attorney directly, his voice ringing with quiet authority. "Your firm, Sterling & Associates, has been engaged in a deliberate scheme to defraud Mrs. Vance. You fabricated a new will, forging Arthur Vance's signature, and conspired with Charlotte Vance to create false medical reports and statements alleging Mrs. Vance's mental incompetence." His voice was steady, unwavering, laying bare the monstrous deception for all to hear. The room fell into a stunned silence, broken only by Charlotte's shallow, ragged breaths. The silence that followed David's damning declaration was thick, heavy, suffocating. Mr. Sterling, initially stunned, quickly recovered, his face contorting into a mask of frantic indignation. "This man is disturbed, Mrs. Vance," he blustered, his voice hoarse, attempting to claw back control of the narrative. "He's a disgruntled former employee with a history of instability. His claims are baseless, pure fantasy. We have sworn affidavits, witnesses who can corroborate Arthur's concerns about your mental state." He gestured wildly towards the two younger attorneys, who now looked like deer caught in headlights. Their earlier composure utterly shattered. David, however, remained remarkably calm. He didn't even raise his voice. "Oh, those witnesses?" he asked, a faint, sardonic smile touching his lips. He reached back into his manila folder. "I believe you'll find these rather enlightening, Mr. Sterling. These are copies of receipts, itemized payments made directly from a Sterling & Associates slush fund to each of your witnesses. Payments for services rendered, specifically for providing fabricated testimonies." He laid a stack of papers on the table, their damning contents clear even from a distance. Charlotte, who had been teetering on the edge of her chair, let out a soft, whimpering sound. The last vestiges of her carefully constructed facade crumbled. Her face was ghost white, her eyes darting like a trapped animal searching for an escape route, but finding none. She collapsed back into her seat, a silent sob escaping her lips, my gaze, cold and unwavering, fixed on Charlotte. The anger that had been simmering within me now hardened into a chilling clarity. The betrayal was real, deep, and orchestrated by someone I had once loved. Why, Charlotte? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the tension in the room like a sharp blade. Why would you do this? Charlotte struggled, her breath catching in her throat, her hands trembling as she tried to compose herself. Her eyes, filled with tears, met mine, but there was no remorse, only a raw, desperate fear. Thomas and I, we have debts, Eleanor, she choked out, the words tumbling over each other in a rush. The house, his business ventures, everything is mortgaged to the limit. You needed to steal from me, I finished for her, my voice rising slightly, imbued with a steely resolve. You needed to strip me of everything Arthur left me, everything he worked for, everything he intended for me. The words felt like lead on my tongue, heavy with the weight of her deceit. David gently pushed a document across the table to me. It was Arthur's true will, crisp and clear. This is Arthur Vance's original last will and testament, Mrs. Vance, he stated, his voice quiet, allowing the gravitas of the moment to settle. It states, unequivocally, that his entire estate, personal and financial, is bequeathed to you, his beloved wife, Eleanor Vance, without condition. My eyes scanned the document, the familiar legal jargon blurring as I reached the end. There it was, Arthur's bold, distinctive signature. It was real, undeniable. A wave of emotion, a potent mix of sorrow and relief, washed over me. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring my vision, not tears of sadness, but of profound gratitude for Arthur's unwavering trust, for his love that transcended even the grave. He had known me, trusted me, loved me, even as those around me sought to diminish and betray me. I looked up, my gaze falling back on Charlotte, whose shoulders were now shaking with silent sobs. How long? I asked, my voice raw with emotion. How long have you been planning this elaborate scheme, Charlotte? Was it while Arthur was still alive? Were you watching us, planning this even as he lay dying? Charlotte, now openly weeping, finally let her guard down. No, not then. Not to hurt you, Eleanor, never to hurt you. The trust. It would have provided for your comfort, you would have wanted for nothing. Her words were a desperate plea for understanding, for absolution. Comfort? I scoffed, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Controlled comfort, Charlotte. Every penny would have been at your discretion. My life, my choices, my financial independence, all held hostage by you and your debts. You weren't protecting me, you were imprisoning me. The truth of her selfishness, laid bare, was sickening. Mr. Sterling, seizing the lull in the conversation, attempted a desperate damage control maneuver. Mrs. Vance. Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting. This has clearly been a very emotional and upsetting turn of events. We can reconvene when everyone is calmer, and we can discuss these allegations properly. He tried to gather the scattered documents, to impose order on the chaos. There will be no rescheduling, Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice cutting through his attempt to regain authority. I looked at the two young attorneys, their faces pale and horrified, then at Charlotte, slumped and broken. The opulence of the room now felt suffocating, a stage for a grand deception. I surveyed the scene, the profound betrayal by a family member, the shocking corruption of a respected legal firm, and felt a chilling clarity. Then, I looked at David Riley. His face was still, his eyes holding a quiet resolve. His disheveled appearance from the parking garage was gone, replaced by a quiet dignity. He had risked everything, his career, his safety, to warn me, a stranger, to uphold justice. He had been my unexpected guardian angel, "It's time to call the police," David stated, his voice firm, unwavering. He reached for his phone. At the mention of the police, Charlotte let out a strangled cry, and finally, mercifully, fainted, slumping forward onto the table amidst the scattered papers, her head lolled to the side, her pearl necklace askew. But watching her crumpled form, I felt no surge of sympathy, no pang of familial pity, only a cold, hard resolve. 950 words. If you're captivated by this story of betrayal and discovery, don't miss a single detail. Make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss what happens next. Your support means the world to me as I share my journey. The police arrived with surprising speed, their sirens a distant wail that grew steadily louder before cutting off abruptly outside the building. 2 uniformed officers entered first, assessing the chaotic scene in the conference room. Shortly after, a woman in plain clothes followed, her presence radiating a quiet authority. Detective Anya Sharma. Her eyes, though sharp and observant, held a surprising kindness that immediately put me a little at ease, despite the gravity of the situation. She was slender, with dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, and a notepad already clutched in her hand. Charlotte had regained consciousness, stirring with a faint groan as the officers entered. The dramatic swoon had run its course. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, darted around the room. Gone was the feigned innocence, the saccharine concern. Her face was a mask of utter defeat, a naked admission of guilt, etched into every line. The attorneys from Sterling and Associates, particularly Mr. Sterling, were a picture of panicked disarray, their earlier arrogance replaced by a palpable fear. Detective Sharma took charge with calm efficiency. She first listened patiently to David, who, despite the sudden influx of officialdom, maintained his composure. He systematically laid out the forged will, Arthur's genuine will, the fabricated medical reports, and the incriminating payment receipts. Detective Sharma examined each document with a professional calm, occasionally nodding, making quick notes in her pad. Her silence was more powerful than any outburst, conveying a seriousness that brooked no argument. Once David had presented his initial findings, Detective Sharma turned her attention to me. Her gaze was direct, empathetic. "Mrs. Vance," she began, her voice low and steady, "can you tell me about your relationship with Charlotte? Take your time. Start from the beginning." I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts. Where to begin with 8 years of subtle deception? Charlotte joined our family 8 years ago when she married my son, Michael, I recounted. My voice still a little shaky but gaining strength with each word. She seemed perfect, always smiling, always agreeable. She appeared genuinely to love Michael. Arthur and I were thrilled. We thought Michael had found a wonderful partner. A bitter laugh escaped me. Looking back now, she was almost too perfect. She never disagreed, always echoed whatever Arthur or I said. She seemed to intuit what we wanted to hear and delivered it flawlessly. I took it as a sign of respect, of her eagerness to fit into our family. Now I see it for what it was, a careful study, a meticulous observation of our habits, our vulnerabilities, our expectations. I paused, remembering the slow creep of her manipulations. The real shift began about 3 years ago, I think. That's when I started to notice subtle things. She'd gently remind me if I forgot a minor detail in a conversation, or correct me on a date. Always with that sweet, concerned tone. At first, I dismissed it. We all forget things sometimes, especially as we get older. But it became more frequent. She'd always make a point of saying, "Oh, Eleanor, you're so forgetful lately. Your memory isn't what it used to be." Always within earshot of Arthur or Michael. Charlotte, still slumped in her chair, stirred. "Eleanor, that's not fair. I was genuinely concerned for you. We all were, after Arthur's diagnosis. It was a stressful time." Her voice was hoarse, a desperate, pathetic attempt to reclaim her narrative. "No, Charlotte." I cut her off, my voice firm. "You weren't concerned. You were planting seeds of doubt. You were subtly, deliberately, manipulating my memory, making me question my own mind, my own sanity. You were isolating me, setting the stage for this very moment. I pointed to the forged will, the false medical reports. Detective Sharma held up a hand, silencing Charlotte. She turned back to David. Mr. Riley, you mentioned specific instances of documentation. Can you elaborate on what you witnessed at the firm regarding these fabrications? David nodded, pulling out a small, worn notebook from his pocket. Yes, Detective. Over the past 6 months, Charlotte Vance was a frequent, albeit secretive, visitor to Sterling and Associates. She always requested meetings with Mr. Sterling or one of his senior associates. I overheard numerous conversations, caught glimpses of documents, and saw the pattern forming. He flipped through his notebook. She would bring in what she called evidence. Fabricated medical reports, like the one presented to Mrs. Vance today, supposedly detailing cognitive decline. False statements from so-called witnesses, the ones I have the payment receipts for. And a series of photographs. Detective Sharma's eyebrows lifted slightly. Photographs? What kind of photographs? She cast a quick, discerning glance at Charlotte, who visibly shifted in her seat, wringing her hands together. Staged photographs, Detective, David explained, his voice devoid of emotion. Photos of Mrs. Vance in everyday situations, but always with captions or accompanying notes designed to imply confusion or incompetence. For example, he looked at a note in his book, a picture of Mrs. Vance looking at a grocery list, captioned, Eleanor struggling to recall items for her shopping, or a photo of her in the garden, with the caption, Eleanor confused about her watering schedule. They were carefully crafted, manipulative images intended to build a false narrative of mental decline. The breath caught in my throat. Outrage, cold and pure, surged through me. She had been following me, photographing me, invading my privacy, twisting my most mundane activities into evidence of my supposed failings. The depth of her betrayal, the calculated, insidious nature of it, was truly horrifying. You followed me? I whispered, my voice thick with disbelief and fury, staring at Charlotte. Charlotte flinched, her eyes widening with a flicker of genuine fear this time. The lawyers. They said I needed evidence, she stammered, her voice barely audible. They said it had to be convincing. They said it would make Arthur's concerns seem more legitimate. Detective Sharma, having absorbed the shocking revelation about the photographs, turned her keen gaze back to me. Mrs. Vance, were you aware of any financial difficulties Thomas and Charlotte might have been experiencing? I shook my head slowly, a deep sadness settling over me. No. Not at all. Thomas's consulting business seemed to be doing quite well. They lived in a beautiful house, took lovely vacations, and seemed to enjoy a very comfortable, affluent lifestyle. They never hinted at any struggles. The image of their seemingly perfect life now shattered, revealing a dark underbelly of deception. Charlotte, her face still tear-stained and swollen, let out a choked sob. It was all a lie, Eleanor. All of it. The lifestyle. It was funded by massive debt, credit cards, personal loans, second mortgages. We were over $300,000 in debt. Her voice was barely a whisper, a stark contrast to her earlier confident tone. My jaw dropped. $300,000. The sum was staggering. Thomas's business started failing about 2 years ago, Charlotte continued, her words rushing out in a desperate torrent. He took out loans, trying to save it, trying to keep up appearances. He was too proud, too ashamed, to tell you or Arthur. He said you would be disappointed. He said he couldn't face telling his father he was failing. Her eyes pleaded for understanding, but I only felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. And then Arthur fell ill, she went on, her voice cracking. And we realized, the inheritance. It was our only way out, our only solution. The pain of her words was a sharp, physical ache. My son, my dear Thomas, struggling in silence, too proud to come to his parents who would have helped him without a second thought. And then, his wife, instead of seeking help, choosing to exploit our trust, to plot this cruel deception. It was a profound wound, deeper than I could have imagined. "Why didn't you just ask for help, Charlotte?" I demanded, my voice trembling with emotion. "Why not come to us? Arthur would have helped Thomas, and I would have helped both of you. Instead, you chose to steal, to lie, to make a mockery of our family, of Arthur's memory." The accusation hung heavy in the air. Charlotte recoiled, shaking her head. "No, Eleanor, it wasn't stealing. The trust was set up to take care of you. You would have been comfortable, provided for. We were just restructuring things." Her words were weak, devoid of conviction. David, who had been quietly observing, scoffed. It was a short, sharp sound, full of disdain. "Comfortable, Mrs. Vance? The trust stipulated an annual allowance of $40,000 for your comfort and care, while the remaining, the substantial bulk of the estate would have been systematically liquidated to pay off the significant debts incurred by Thomas and Charlotte Vance." He looked directly at me. "The firm, of course, would have taken a hefty percentage for their services in setting up and managing this arrangement. $40,000. My own money, my entire life savings, reduced to a pittance, while they squandered the rest to pay for their reckless spending. The true depth of the betrayal, the audacious control they planned to exert over every aspect of my life, slammed into me with devastating force. It wasn't just about money. It was about power, control, and the complete disregard for my autonomy and well-being. Was Thomas involved in this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the question tearing at my heart. Did he know about the plan to declare me incompetent? Did he know about the forged will? Charlotte hesitated, her gaze dropping to her lap. She wrung her hands, a silent struggle playing out on her tear-streaked face. Her silence was louder than any confession. It confirmed my worst fear. Thomas, my son, my beloved son, knew about the financial ruin and saw the inheritance as a solution. He knew about the debts, Charlotte finally admitted, her voice raspy, and he knew Arthur's will was going to cover them. But I made him believe that Arthur genuinely changed the will because he was worried about you, Eleanor, about your memory, your health. Detective Sharma, ever observant, scribbled a note. "So, you manipulated your husband as well, Miss Vance? Made him believe his own mother was losing her mind?" Charlotte nodded, tears streaming freely now. "Yes. I had to. The lawyers said we needed Arthur to believe it was his idea, his concern. So, over several months, I started fabricating incidents for Thomas." "Fabricating?" I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. "What incidents are you talking about, Charlotte?" "Little things," she mumbled, not meeting my gaze. "Like you forgetting to turn off the stove, or getting lost on your way to the grocery store, or accusing the mailman of not delivering your mail, even when he had." "None of that ever happened," I exclaimed, my anger flaring anew. "I have never forgotten the stove. I know my way around this town better than anyone. And I've always been polite to our mailman, a lovely young man." The sheer inventiveness of her lies was appalling. Charlotte finally looked up, her eyes pleading. "I know, Eleanor. I know. But I twisted things. I took normal, everyday occurrences and made them sound like symptoms, like you were starting to forget, starting to lose your grip. I told Thomas these stories, and he..." Her confession was a poisoned arrow, striking at the heart of my relationship with my son, tainting his memory with this web of lies. 3 days later, the silence in my home was oppressive. It was the kind of silence that amplifies every unspoken fear, every painful question. My phone sat on the coffee table, a silent accuser, displaying 17 missed calls, all from Thomas. I couldn't bring myself to answer. The thought of his voice, knowing what I now knew, twisted a knot of sorrow and anger in my gut. Was he complicit? How much did my own son know about Charlotte's cruel plan? The uncertainty was agonizing. A gentle knock interrupted my reverie. It was David. He had been a constant, reassuring presence since that horrifying meeting, helping me navigate the initial stages of the legal fallout, arranging for a new, trustworthy attorney. He'd become an unlikely confidant, a testament to the strange ironies of life. A stranger's loyalty proving stronger than family ties. "Are you all right, Mrs. Vance?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. He knew. He understood the pain I was grappling with, the agony of this betrayal, as well as can be expected. "David," I replied, forcing a weak smile. "Just waiting for answers." As if on cue, a more insistent pounding came from the front door. I knew who it was. My heart pounded. This was it. I walked to the door, David just a step behind me. Thomas and Charlotte stood on my porch, looking utterly disheveled and broken. Thomas's usually neatly combed hair was a mess, his eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. Charlotte's face was pale and blotchy, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The confident, polished couple I knew had vanished, replaced by two people burdened by the weight of their own deceit. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in with warmth. Instead, I stepped aside, remaining standing, my arms crossed, a shield against the pain. I needed answers. I needed to understand the true depth of Thomas's involvement. "Mom," Thomas began immediately, his voice hoarse. "Detective Sharma. She told us everything. About the fake documents, the forged will, the trust. All of it." His gaze was desperate, pleading for understanding. "And what did you tell her, Thomas?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I told her I didn't know," he rushed to explain, running a hand through his hair. "I swear, Mom, I had no idea about the forged will or the fake medical reports, or that Charlotte was taking pictures. I truly believed Arthur had amended his will out of genuine concern for you. Charlotte convinced me. She said it was for your protection." He seemed genuinely horrified, but the memory of Charlotte's confession in the conference room still burned in my mind. "And the debts, Thomas?" I pressed, ignoring his protests for a moment. "Charlotte told us about the $300,000. Is that true?" His shoulders sagged. He nodded, unable to meet my gaze. "Yes, Mom. It's true. My business. It started failing 2 years ago. I kept trying to save it, borrowing more and more. I was so ashamed. I didn't want to disappoint you or Dad. I thought I could fix it, make it right before anyone knew." His voice broke, thick with shame. "And when your father became ill," I continued, my voice betraying no emotion, "did your thoughts immediately turn to his inheritance as your only way out, as Charlotte put it?" Thomas flinched as if I had struck him. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He didn't answer directly, but the unspoken confession hung heavy in the air. Charlotte, who had been standing silently, her head bowed, now looked up. Her eyes were still red, but a flicker of something, perhaps a desperate desire for full disclosure, passed through them. "Thomas," she urged, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell her the truth, all of it. Don't hide anything else." Thomas took a shaky breath, then plunged into the confession. When Dad got sick, Charlotte started talking about it. She would gradually point out little things about you, Mom, like you'd just forgotten something small or misremembered a detail. She'd say, "Oh, Eleanor, you're so forgetful lately." Or, "Arthur's really worried about Mom's memory. She said Dad was concerned you wouldn't be able to manage his estate, and he was thinking of making arrangements to protect you." My heart ached, not just for the betrayal, but for the ease with which Thomas had been manipulated. "What little things, Thomas?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. "Give me examples of these incidents Charlotte fabricated for you." Thomas recounted the stories Charlotte had woven for him, the very ones she had mentioned to Detective Sharma. She said you'd forgotten to turn off the stove after cooking dinner, and she had to rush back to put it out. She claimed you'd gotten lost driving to the grocery store, even though it's a route you've taken for decades, and she had to go find you. And she told me you once accused the mailman of stealing your Social Security check, even though he'd just delivered it. With each accusation, I felt a fresh wave of outrage. "Thomas, none of that ever happened," I exclaimed, my voice rising. "The stove? I've never left it on unattended in my life. The grocery store? I know that route. Blindfolded. And the mailman? He's a lovely young man, and I've always had the utmost respect for him. Charlotte was the one who was constantly asking me about my social security checks, implying I should be checking them more often, making me paranoid. Thomas stared at me, his eyes widening in genuine confusion and dawning horror. He looked from me to Charlotte, then back to me, the pieces of his wife's deep deceit finally clicking into place. The realization of how thoroughly he had been misled, how deeply he had misjudged his own mother's mental state based on Charlotte's lies, was visibly crushing him. Charlotte, her face still streaked with tears, her voice now barely audible, finally admitted the full extent of her cunning. I twisted things, Thomas, she whispered, looking at her husband with a desperate, broken expression. I made you see problems that weren't there. Thomas stood there, utterly shattered. The truth, finally laid bare, had stripped him of his composure, his pride, everything. He looked at Charlotte, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and profound hurt. Why, Charlotte? He choked out, his voice raw. Why all these elaborate lies? Why make me believe such things about my own mother? Charlotte, desperate to salvage some semblance of justification, tried to explain, tears still streaming down her face. I was trying to save us, Thomas. To save our family. You were drowning in debt, and I couldn't bear to see you fail. I had to make everyone believe Eleanor needed help managing the estate, that it was the only way to get Arthur's money and fix everything without asking for charity. You mean steal from me? I interjected, my voice cutting through her desperate narrative like a knife. There was no room for euphemisms now, no space for her self-serving justifications. No, not steal, Charlotte protested weakly, shrinking under my gaze. We would have taken care of you, Eleanor. You would have had a comfortable life, everything you needed. Her words were hollow, ringing with hypocrisy. A comfortable life? I echoed, the contempt clear in my voice. David here revealed your plans, a $40,000 annual allowance. While the vast majority of Arthur's money he intended for my security and future, would be used to repay your debts. You weren't planning to take care of me, Charlotte. You were planning to control me, to make me a ward of your generosity, using my own inheritance. Thomas gasped, a guttural sound of pure horror. He finally understood the full scope of Charlotte's betrayal, not just of me, but of him. The layers of manipulation, the lies, the complete disregard for my well-being, all for their own financial gain. His face paled even further, a terrible realization dawning in his eyes. Suddenly, Charlotte's carefully constructed facade of victimhood cracked, revealing a flash of anger, of deep-seated resentment. What else was I supposed to do? She screamed, her voice shrill, cracking with frustration. We were losing everything. Your pride, Thomas, your stupid pride, wouldn't let you ask your parents for help. I saw Arthur dying, Eleanor with millions, and us with nothing. I had to do something. You had to destroy your mother to save yourself? I stated. The words a cold, undeniable truth. You chose to demonize me, to strip me of my dignity, rather than face your own financial failures with honesty. Thomas finally broke down. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands, his body shaking with deep, wrenching sobs. Mom, I'm so sorry, he choked out between gasps. I am so sorry. I can't believe I fell for it. I can't believe I doubted you. I should have known better. I should have come to you. His remorse, though late, seemed genuine, born of profound shame and regret. I looked at him, my son, and a pang of grief, separate from my anger, passed through me. Arthur never doubted me, Thomas, I said, my voice softer now, tinged with a deep sadness. Not for a moment. He trusted me implicitly. Until his very last day, the memory of Arthur's love and unwavering belief in me was a balm to my wounded spirit. Then I turned back to Charlotte, her face still defiant despite her tears, her earlier outburst having revealed the true depth of her resentment. How long? Charlotte? I asked again, my voice sharp. How long have you been planning this? When did you decide I was the enemy, the obstacle to your financial comfort? A flicker of that naked resentment crossed Charlotte's face again. You didn't need $2 million, Eleanor, she burst out, her voice still raw with emotion. You're old. What were you going to do with it? We were losing everything. Our house, our future. We needed it. Thomas looked up, his face a mixture of shock and horror. Charlotte, how can you say that? That's Mom's inheritance. Arthur's legacy. The idea that she felt entitled to my money, that she saw it as hers for the taking, horrified him more than the lies about my mental state. You chose to take Charlotte, I said, my voice cutting through their argument. You chose to take, rather than ask. That is the fundamental difference. One is love, one is theft. I looked from Charlotte's defiant, tear-stained face to Thomas's heartbroken, remorseful one. The air in the room was thick with shattered trust, unspoken accusations, and agonizing regret. This entire ordeal had unearthed truths far uglier than I could have ever imagined. So, I stated, looking at both of them, my voice firm and resolute. What happens now? The question hung in the silence, an ultimatum, laying the full weight of their choices and the uncertain future squarely on their shoulders. The living room fell into a heavy silence, punctuated only by Charlotte's sniffles and Thomas's ragged breathing. I stood, unmoving, watching them, waiting for them to fully grasp the gravity of their situation, the enormity of what they had done. David, ever present, remained a silent sentinel by the doorway. Finally, Thomas broke the quiet, his voice still thick with tears, but with a nascent urgency. What do you want us to do, Mom? He asked, looking up at me, his eyes pleading. I had spent sleepless nights since the meeting, wrestling with my emotions, with what justice truly meant, with the unraveling of my family. I want the truth, Thomas, all of it, I stated, my voice firm, and I want to know if there's any hope of restoring something. Thomas nodded, taking a shaky breath. He began to recount Charlotte's insidious manipulation, painting a picture of calculated deceit that was even more chilling than I had imagined. She started after Dad's diagnosis, he revealed, his voice low. She'd mention how frail you looked, how Arthur was worried about burdening you. When Dad had his doctor's appointments, she'd suggest to me that he was discreetly asking about Mom's memory behind your back. She made it seem like Arthur was genuinely concerned about your ability to manage things without him. Charlotte, her head bowed, her voice barely audible, confirmed his words. I took advantage of Arthur's vulnerability, of the stress you were all under. I made it seem like his concerns about you were legitimate, that he was trying to protect you. She would tell me stories every week, Thomas continued, his voice heavy with self-reproach. About you forgetting your keys, or misplacing your glasses, or repeating a story. She'd always frame it with concern, saying, "Oh, poor Eleanor, she's really starting to slip." She even showed me some of those pictures she took, saying they were proof. Proof of what, Charlotte? I challenged, my gaze piercing. Proof that I was mentally unfit? That I needed a conservatorship so you could control my life and my money? Charlotte flinched, then lifted her head, a desperate attempt at justification still flickering in her eyes. It was to protect you, Eleanor. From making bad financial decisions, from being overwhelmed, we just wanted to make sure your money was managed properly, so you'd be cared for. The unspoken ending, of course, was, and so we could pay off our debts. You used my love for you, my trust in you, against me, I said, my voice rising slightly, thick with the weight of that betrayal. You twisted my loyalty, my affection, into a weapon to disarm me. That is not protection, Charlotte. That is the deepest form of betrayal. For the first time, a genuine recognition of the enormity of her destructive actions seemed to settle over Charlotte. Her shoulders sagged, and she stopped trying to defend herself, replaced by a raw, painful understanding. What about the lawyers, Mom? Thomas asked, shifting the focus. perhaps unable to bear the weight of Charlotte's confession any longer. "What happens to them?" "Detective Sharma is building a strong case," I replied, my voice firm. "Mr. Sterling and his associates will be facing criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. David's evidence is undeniable." I then turned my attention solely to Charlotte. "As for you, Charlotte, your cooperation with the police, offering full disclosure of the firm's illegal activities, might lead to a plea agreement. Otherwise, you will face the full legal consequences for your role in this conspiracy. Regardless of legal repercussions, however, your actions have permanent ramifications. You have destroyed a trust that can never be rebuilt. That is a life sentence in itself." Charlotte finally broke down completely, burying her face in her hands. "I was wrong," she sobbed, her voice muffled. "I can see that now. I let desperation turn me into someone I don't recognize. I am so sorry, Eleanor." Thomas looked up at me, his eyes brimming with hope and despair. "Mom," he pleaded, "can you ever forgive me? Can our family be fixed?" I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the man who had been so deeply manipulated by his wife. "Thomas," I said, my voice softer now, "forgiveness is an ongoing choice. It's a journey. I forgive you, as a victim of Charlotte's deceit, a man who was too proud to ask for help, but not one who actively sought to harm me, but Charlotte." My gaze hardened as I looked at her. I cannot forgive her. The anger, the rage, I've let go of that. It only harms me. But forgiveness? No. There is no path back for her. I paused, letting my words sink in. Charlotte will never be welcome in my home, or my life, again. 6 months later, the legal dust had settled. Charlotte, due to her full cooperation and David's crucial testimony, received a sentence of probation and extensive community service, a milder fate than she deserved, but one that left her reputation in tatters. Mr. Sterling and his associates, however, faced the full force of the law. The firm was dismantled, and they were sent to prison for their egregious acts of fraud. David Riley, my unexpected hero, found a new purpose. He left the legal world behind and became my groundskeeper, overseeing my garden and property. A quiet, steady presence that brought me immense comfort and a tangible reminder of integrity. Thomas, humbled and heartbroken, divorced Charlotte shortly after the trial. He moved out of the house they had built on lies, selling it to clear their remaining debts. He was slowly, painstakingly, rebuilding his consulting business, working to restore his integrity. He refused any financial help from me, determined to stand on his own 2 feet. Our relationship was still fragile, a delicate sapling needing careful tending. But there was hope. He visited often, expressing remorse, slowly earning back a fraction of the trust that had been shattered. And me? I found a new peace, a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. The painful experience, while devastating, had also ignited a new purpose within me. I began volunteering, tutoring disadvantaged students, and advocating against financial exploitation, sharing my story to help others. I had fully reclaimed my story, confident in Arthur's unwavering trust and my own enduring strength. The garden, once just a beautiful space, became a sanctuary, a place of growth and renewal. Tended with care by David, a symbol of the unexpected paths life takes and the profound resilience of the human spirit.